You can see the symptoms coming to the surface. People spend time shaking, crying, letting out the traumas.
All right, Rick, it's great to be speaking with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you today. Looking forward to it.
So I thought to start, for those who are unfamiliar with MAPS, could you talk about what is MAPS and why did you found it all those years ago to begin with?
Well, MAPS stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. It's a nonprofit organization that I conceived of as a nonprofit pharmaceutical company to develop psychedelics into prescription medicines. We do a lot of other things as well. We're very interested in public education. We end up doing harm reduction. We have a Zendo project, which is sort of at Burning Man and events all over where people are doing psychedelics. We have um, peer support, volunteers, most of them therapists that are willing to help people process difficult experiences. So we have kind of a two-track approach. One is to medicalize through the FDA and then have it, the therapy is covered by insurance. The other is drug policy reform. So fundamentally, I think that the drug war is counterproductive. It's a violation of human rights. We should have freedom to explore our consciousness. And our culture would be better off if we had licensed legalization for psychedelics and other drugs, where different than what we have now. For example, for alcohol, um, you could be a drunk driver and then you get pulled over and then you get a ticket, you lose your driver's license, but you still can go buy alcohol, get back in your car and kill people, which happens a lot. So there should be kind of a license for drugs rather than just you can buy them. And then if you misbehave, you get punished for your misbehavior, and then maybe you lose your license for a while or something like that. So MAPS is now roughly 100 people. We're two companies. MAPS, which is the nonprofit, and there's a few below 30 people in this group, and then the other group is around 70 people, which is the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. That's basically our pharmaceutical development arm, and that's the group that's going to make MDMA into a medicine and then sell it for a profit under prescription use, hopefully, and then whatever profits are made are going to go back to the mission of MAPS. So the nonprofit is the 100% owner of the for-profit. So we're a nonprofit owning a psychedelic pharmaceutical company, and we are getting close to approval for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. And in the history of MAPS since 1986, when I started it, we've raised over $100 million in donations or multi-year commitments. And so it's kind of astonishing to think about it.
Wow, yeah, and I want to get into all that, the legalization and the funding and all that. But before that, so you mentioned exploring the consciousness as
Yeah.
kind of, one of the goals of psychedelics, exploring the mind. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was reading that you were mentored by Stan Grof, right? The famous Hungarian,
Well, Czech.
um,
He's from the Czech Republic.
sorry, Czech, right? Czech
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
psychotherapist. And what did you
Yeah.
learn from him? How did
Well,
you get
uh,
started exploring your own consciousness?
well, if it wasn't for Stan, who's now 89 years old, and we're in very frequent contact even still. But it's because of Stan that I've decided to devote my life to psychedelics. That took place in 1972 when I was 18 years old. So I was a college student, started college in 1971. Um, I had been more and more focused as I was growing up on psychological factors. I was particularly traumatized by the Holocaust, being from a Jewish family, um, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the whole world going up in a nuclear conflagration. That was scary as a child. And this just led me more and more to psychological factors, and then the Vietnam War, and I became a draft resistor, and now it was my own country doing things that I thought we shouldn't be doing. Um, and I spoke to my parents, and they said, if you're going to be a draft resistor, you're going to go to jail, you're going to be a felon, you'll never be able to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor. You'll never be able to be a lawyer, none of this. And I'm like, that's the price I have to pay, but I'm not gonna, go to Vietnam and try to kill people or not get killed just so I could have a certain kind of job. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then at college, this was after the backlash against the 60s and the psychedelic revolution, and psychedelics and all other drugs were criminalized in 1970 by Nixon and the Controlled Substances Act. And so I started thinking I should try some psychedelics and see what they do. And I had the delusion that the more psychedelics you take, the faster you evolve. I wish that that were true, but I completely underestimated the importance of integration. So in the summer, not summer, but in the early part of 1972, I went to the guidance counselor at college, and I said, "Help me with my trips." And this is a period of time. This was a private school. They took me seriously, and the guidance counselor gave me a book to read. And the book was Realms of the Human Unconscious, Observations from LSD Research by Stanislav Grof. And it was reading that book that everything came together for me, because politically, it was about the mystical experience as one of the realms of consciousness. And the thought politically is that if we can feel our primary identification with the universe, with everything, that with the sweep of evolution and history, and that we feel part of this big picture, and that's fundamentally who we are, then when we come back from that, people that are different in terms of religion or gender or race or nationality, we know that we have more in common with them than separate us. So I felt like that mystical experience is going to be the antidote to genocide and the world going up and environmental destruction. So Stan talked about that, but it was primarily science overlaid on realms of the human unconscious and on religious mystical topics. So I don't trust religion as much, but I trust science more than religion. But it had a reality check built into it, which was therapy. Can we help people get better? So reading this book, just like, I can't have a normal job, I can be an underground psychedelic therapist. This is the solution to my future. The world and humanity needs these experiences. And so I wrote a letter to Stan. The guidance counselor not only had this book, but had Stan's address. The book didn't even get published till 1975. So I got a manuscript copy in 1972. I just had the most luckiest guidance counselor. I couldn't have been more lucky. And Stan, when I wrote him a letter, actually wrote me back. And I did a workshop with him in 1972 with Joan Halifax, who he was temporarily married to. And I've been inspired by him ever since. And it's really been that work by Stan that made me realize, he has said that psychedelics are to the study of the mind what the microscope is to biology and the telescope is to astronomy. And when we think about human history and we think about the telescope, Father Bruno was burned at the stake for saying that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe based on Copernicus and Galileo's findings. And Galileo died under house arrest. And so the telescope itself was controversial. Now we don't think of the telescope as a disruptive piece of technology that has to be criminalized and we have to punish people that use the telescope. But some of us still think that way about psychedelics. So the hope is, and this is, I think, because of a lot of the work that Stan did, is that one day the psychedelics will be seen as a tool, just like the microscope and the telescope. And it will bring to the surface parts of our unconscious, parts of our inner conflicts, and new experiences to help us really evolve as individuals and as humanity.
Yeah, I just recently finished reading The Way of the Psychonaut by Stan Grof.
Oh, good.
And, it's interesting because you might think, well, I guess one counter argument to that would be, well, you were just on drugs. Like, how does what you were seeing have any relevance to the human mind as it relates to other people's minds? But what Dr. Grof has done is really bring a scientific approach and noticed commonalities and connections and kind of started to map the unconscious and these states or these recurring themes in his work with patients. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the science and what are we finding about the mind as it relates to psychedelics.
Yeah, thank you. I think, in part because Stan talked about the cartography of uh, the human mind, that also helped me come up with the name MAPS, because he used that metaphor. Um, um, well, what one thing I think that's extraordinarily reassuring, but will be quite controversial in the current world, is that um, there is, I believe, and this is still to be proven, but I believe that there's um, sort of this unit of mystical experience that we talked about that's common for all humans and that underlies all the different religions. And I would sort of communicate religions being like languages. They all have their different flavors, their different emphasis, what they're kind of good for, best at, but they're all basically doing the same thing, which is trying to help us, communicate to each other. Religions, I think, are similar. There can be different religious, cultural um, origins, different symbols, different mythologies, different people that are the Buddha or Jesus or Moses or stuff. But so I think that in the structure of the mind, as you're saying, there is this commonality that we all share. Um, I think that the way Stan described it was sort of three different areas of the mind, main areas. One is sort of psychodynamic, which is more what Freud was trying to talk about. I think Freud is like Columbus in that Columbus discovered America but wrote the map all wrong. I think, Freud helped us understand the power of the unconscious, but had all sorts of culturally specific views that he universalized, like penis envy and the Oedipus complex, and a lot of these things I think were part of the culture context, but not really fundamental factors of the human mind. But what Sam talked is that there's this vast realm of sort of psychodynamic issues in the mind, but then there's what he called the perinatal matrices, or the birth trauma, the process of birth that sort of imprints on us all a certain dynamic of being in this oceanic bliss, and then the womb starts contracting, and you don't know what's going to happen. This fear of death, fear of, and then this struggle, and then you're on your own, and that there's all different variations according to that. But a lot of these are sort of patterns established early of how people process things, and then there's what Stan called the Jungian or the transpersonal area, where things that we share in common. So mystical experiences. I do believe, and again, this is, I think, what Stan has tried to talk about, is that this is a more challenging area, but there's some ways where our minds interconnect. I mean, and so I do believe that there's probably ways to get information in a holographic way through, so we talk about ESP or things like that. A lot of times under psychedelics, people will have experiences from other times and places where they seem to bring back information that then can be verified sometimes. So this is the more controversial thing. But I think our minds do interconnect, not just with what's going on, but with what has happened in the past. And the question you started about saying, oh, that's just a drug, let's discount these experiences. So first off, our brain is drugs. What is our brain but, electrical, chemical series of, so if it's just a drug experience, our brain is just a drug experience, and we can say, oh, it's not real, and it's true. We see the world through a filter. So another approach to thinking about the mind has been with Abraham Maslow. And many people may know about the hierarchy of needs, and your safety, survival needs, your belonging needs, your esteem needs, and then the peak of this need hierarchy was self-actualization. Now that's humanistic psychology. Stan Grof and Abe Maslow and a few others near the end of Abe Maslow's life started transpersonal psychology, which is about the things we have in common by being human, the confrontation with death, and these mystical experiences that go beyond our individual ego. and that's this sort of transpersonal realm. Um, and so I think within this sort of broad spectrum of what can be happening, a lot of times the roots of psychological issues will be resolved through some of these transpersonal experiences. Not always, but what Stan was trying to do basically, I think, was to demonstrate that for healing of therapy, a lot of times there's deeper roots than just what people are sharing. That there's fundamental issues, and so that the therapeutic process is when I talked about the reality check for Stan. So you can say it's just a drug. These experiences are not real. That's a separate kind of question. Are they real or not? The issue that I have focused on addressing, that Stan has, is are they useful? Are they helpful to help people grow, to enjoy life more, to use this precious time that we have alive more fully? And so I think you can have all these discussions about are these, is it a drug? Is it real? Is it not? But is it therapeutic? Is it useful? Is a more important frame for me. And I think that a lot of times people do have profound healings from thinking about their birth, or thinking about death, or thinking about spirituality that isn't related to their direct life.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, that pragmatically speaking, that I mean, that's what we should care about, is do these things improve human lives? Do they lessen suffering? Not ontologically, what is the out there that is actually real and not just projected into our minds, which, gets into more philosophical stuff without any hard answers. So it's like, why not just look at these as tools that can then be give us better and better maps for improving human lives.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
so
that,
yeah,
that philosophers, other people, it is important to answer these questions. What's real, what's not. But I think that, as you say, that can take another couple centuries for people to figure that out. And meanwhile, people are suffering now. So is it useful is more important to me.
right, right, and yeah. So let's talk about some of that research being done. So catch us up on the latest in the psychedelics research sphere.
Okay, well, uh, I have an image, but I'll describe it. So because we won't share a slide or anything, but there's been the slide is of the Web of Science, and it's a list of psychedelic publications by year, by decade, going back to
Mm.
the 50s and 60s. Um, right now, in this moment in time, 2020, in the last few years, there are more psychedelic scientific papers published, vastly more, multiple times more than in the peak of the 1960s and early 70s. So we are really in a realm of a renaissance in psychedelic research. And there's a whole range of studies that are being done all over the world. And we see universities that, even Harvard has now got a psychedelic research center at MGH, Massachusetts General Hospital, um, Cambridge Health Alliance. So where Timothy Leary was, sort of where people think psychedelics went off the track in the 60s. Now there's psychedelic research there. Yale has a psychedelic study, NYU, UC San Francisco, Medical University of South Carolina, all these schools. So I'd say that there's the area of research that I'm most interested in, which is for political reasons, is drug development, making drugs in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy into medicines to help people in their suffering. There's a whole other area of research, which is mechanism of action research. How do these um, substances help us understand how does the mind actually work, and how do these drugs actually work? So there's been an enormous amount of information on mechanism of action. And then there's another bunch of studies that are more on safety, like, how do these drugs interact in the body and the brain, and what are the health consequences of that? There's yet another area of research that's, I think, is going to be growing in the future, which is epigenetics. So I just gave a presentation right before this to the Bronx VA and Mount Sinai Hospital, and Rachel Yehuda is a researcher who is going to lead our MDMA project inside the Bronx VA, but she's done studies with Holocaust survivors and their children, and she's identified mechanisms, epigenetic mechanisms by which trauma is passed from generation to generation, set points for anxiety and trauma. So how is it that these set points are set? How is this epigenetic information passed? And what does therapy, with psychedelics or not, how does that impact what we pass on to our children? So that's going to be another area of research. I think that the National Institute of Mental Health, the traditional funding agencies, they like mechanism of action research. I'm more results oriented, which is drug development. So on drug development, let me just say that we are in phase 3, which is the final stage of research to make a drug into a medicine for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. We've gotten good results from our first phase 3 study, and we're just starting our second. We hope by early 2023 or late 2022 that we would have FDA approval. And if
what
we
were those results as well?
Well, it's hard for I'll just share that you know, because we're trying to get a scientific paper published, I can say now that there was very statistically significant with substantial effect size with an excellent safety profile. So in other words, the first phase 3 study was successful. And so now we are moving on to trying to do the second phase 3 study. There are groups that are doing psilocybin for major depression disorder and also treatment-resistant depression, for-profit groups, Compass, nonprofit group USONA. They're in phase 2. There's a whole range of studies into a wide variety of therapeutic applications with addiction. And we've also done worked with Ben Sessa, a psychiatrist in England, who's done MDMA for alcoholics. You help them process their trauma, they don't have so much of a need to escape. There's been studies with psilocybin for nicotine addiction, for cocaine addiction, for alcoholism. There's just an enormous range of work with the treatment of addiction. Depression, social anxiety has been well studied. People with life-threatening illnesses have been studied. We're about to do work with eating disorders with MDMA. There's psilocybin studies starting with eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder. There's the potential, some interest in schizophrenia, looking at MDMA for schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder. There's enormous potential there. I think from the neuroscience, let me just say that what has been discovered is that the psychedelics promote new neural connections. They promote neuroplasticity. So how is it, so you can say, oh, it's just a drug and, you know, it's not real, but how is it that you can have just a drug experience one time or a few times and it changes your life and it lasts? How can that be? Well, the answer is that we are resculpting people's brains, or people are resculpting their own brains under the influence of psychedelics. So there's a paper that just came out a while ago in Nature by a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins in mice that showed that MDMA releases oxytocin, which is the hormone of love and connection, nursing mothers and all, but it produces what's called the opening of a social reward learning process. So people can, you know, we socialize more at early ages, animals too as well. It reopens that, but it promotes new connections. So new, not new neurons necessarily in terms of the birth of new neurons, but that does seem to be happening with other psychedelics, but it promotes synaptic growth. And so we're creating new neural pathways. Just as an example, in PTSD, we showed that PTSD patients have a heightened activity in the amygdala, the fear processing part of the brain. After MDMA therapy, the activity in the amygdala goes down, and they've been able to it's called fear extinction and memory reconsolidation. The memories are put into more long-term storage. So there's an enormous amount to be learned from neuroscience research. What I'm not sure about is whether the neuroscience research will help the therapy be more effective. There's a lot of benefits in neuroscience. Maybe they'll develop new drugs, or, you know, or just understanding how the brain works can be great in many different ways, but the translational neuroscience still remains to be demonstrated, that we can take neuroscience findings and turn it into ways to help people better. And then there's all, the one area of research that hasn't happened yet is psychedelics for ESP research. I think that would be interesting to happen again. But there's just so much that can be learned, and it's just so wonderful to be in this period of time in history when there's more psychedelic research than ever before. Humanity needs it more than ever before. And I think we've grown over the last 50 years as culture, as a world, so that I think we can introduce and mainstream psychedelics without the backlash that we had before. That's the real challenge. Can we do that?
Yeah. Well, it's really exciting, and congrats on those early results. And, the fact that so many different compounds here are successful in treating a variety of disorders, it makes me wonder, I mean, are there common mechanisms here? Like you started to talk about depatterning a little bit, like the idea that getting stuck in a mental rut, this could help us see a different perspective on the world. But are there what do we know about the mechanisms beyond that? Like,
That's
why
a
are
great,
these so effective?
yeah. I'd say that the fundamental concept is that symptoms are to not be suppressed, but to be explored and experienced. So the classic kind of pharmaceutical drugs for psychiatric indications are ones that reduce the symptoms. They don't necessarily get to the core of the problem, and they're often meant to be taken on a daily basis for months, years, or a lifetime. So the thing about psychedelic psychotherapy is that the fundamental concept is that the symptoms need to be brought into full awareness and fully experienced rather than suppressed. And that the psychedelics in a safe, supportive environment where the symptoms come to the surface can be profoundly healing. So, for example, there's a documentary I'd refer to people called Trip of Compassion, and it's on Vimeo. It's about 3 of our PTSD patients from the Israeli study. It's got English subtitles. Some of it is in English as well. But it's the most patient-focused documentary ever made about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. And you can see the symptoms coming to the surface. People spend time shaking, crying, letting out the traumas. That when it happened to them, the events, they had to really focus on survival. And you don't always emotionally process. And then you get stuck in those situations. Some people do. And so it's about bringing all that to the surface in a way where you feel safe, where you can process it. So psychedelics bring things to the surface, and that's what's been so very important. So I'd say that that's the fundamental thing, is that we're not scared, and that there's a difference between an intellectual understanding and an experiential processing. So I think a lot of Freudian analysis, you can think about it as the power dynamics. The analyst is listening to you. The analyst is the one that knows. The analyst puts an interpretation on you, and it's, the healing comes from the analyst, and it's all cognitive, and that's why people have been in psychoanalysis for decades and they don't seem to get much better. They're just so. There's an album by Rita Marley, who was Bob Marley's wife, and the title is "Who Feels It Knows It." So I think the psychedelic therapy is about feeling it, knowing it, and expressing it. Stan Grof has said something very poetic and beautiful, which is the full expression of an emotion is the funeral pyre of that emotion. So and I think that is the focus of the therapy, meaning that everything's in motion. The earth is spinning. We're in this universe. Everything is spinning. The sun's going to die. There's nothing universal. Everything is in motion. Everything is moving. We're all connected. And when it comes to emotions, if you can fully experience something, then it will change. It moves from sort of foreground to background. And a good analogy for this is grief. Somebody that we love has died, or somebody we love has gotten hurt. We're sad for something. And when you keep your feelings bottled up, it always concerns you. But if you can cry, if you can let it out, if you can let out the grief, then it's not like you're no longer sad that the person has died, but it's part of what's happened, and then you can move on. So I think that's the core aspect of the therapy, is bringing symptoms that have been too painful for many different reasons, been suppressed, bringing them to the surface, helping people through them and process them. And then with the most important part is helping them integrate it, so that then they can ground these experiences and operate in new ways without the use of the drug. So that's another big difference between psychedelic therapy and regular psychopharmacology, in that we're not looking to give people drugs every day for the rest of their lives. We're looking to give psychotherapy, deep, profound, enhanced by the drugs, that then get to the core of the problem and then make it so people don't need the drugs anymore. And that's why, coming from a nonprofit context, it's easier for us to focus on that.
Right. And I imagine that creates some competing interests with the drug companies, right? I mean, I don't know much about public policy, but how are you dealing, or what kind of pushback are you facing?
Zero, surprisingly. So the reason is because the SSRIs, a lot of these drugs that are really have been very big moneymakers for pharma, are now generic. They've been invented 20 years ago or more, where they came on the market. And developing new drugs for what are called central nervous system diseases has been very difficult. There haven't been a lot of new developments. So that's why pharma in general, a lot of the pharma companies have abandoned research with CNS drugs. And a lot of their drugs are now generic. So we don't really see any opposition at this point from now the pharmaceutical companies have in the past supported the drug war. They support Partnership for a Drug-Free America, and they've support their drugs are okay, but other drugs are bad. Now you've got to go buy drugs from them, and you can't just get marijuana for, that's changing too. So the other part is that the way the FDA is structured, if it's designed to insulate the FDA reviewers from outside pressure. So if one pharmaceutical company could influence the FDA and get them to not like a competitor's drug or something like that, then all the pharmaceutical companies would be doing that, and it would gum up the whole works. Now, up until recently, President Trump has stayed out of politicizing the FDA, although he has recently tried to politicize the FDA when it comes to vaccines and drugs for COVID. And so that's been terrible, because our whole model of change is based on FDA being science over politics. They haven't always been that way, but since 1992, the FDA had a formal advisory committee meeting. They decided to put psychedelics back into research, science over politics. So that has been the way, and it's a dangerous precedent when that process gets politicized, because that's when you can imagine pharmaceutical companies trying to use their political leverage to, but for example, if you wanted to call the FDA and say, hey, what's going on with MAPS's work with MDMA, FDA can't tell you. They cannot, for privacy reasons, they cannot tell you about what is being studied. I mean, you can look at clinicaltrials.gov. There's other ways for you to find out, but the main point to your question is that this is a new modality. It will replace a lot of other drugs that people are getting, but we don't feel that there's opposition from the pharma. And to give you one highlight example of that, MDMA was invented by Merck in 1912 is when, so it's 108 years old, MDMA. They never tested it in humans. Recently, as I mentioned, we've got 70 people in the benefit corporation, a lot of them from pharma. We call them the refugees from pharma. One of them had a friend who was a senior executive at Merck. And while we were doing work with the FDA, then we were starting to think about Europe and globalization. And this was an expert from Merck in globalization. And this woman joined one of our strategy calls for free, consulting with us even though she's from the company that invented MDMA, and she's helping us try to move it forward.
Hmm.
So it was very reassuring to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, just from the outside, it truly is a fascinating scene because from what I'm seeing is Silicon Valley wealthy entrepreneurs, even Wall Street elites now putting money into this.
Yeah, yeah,
A lot of my updates are coming from Tim Ferriss. You've got the Navy SEALs just put, I think it was $50,000
yeah,
into
yeah, yeah,
PTSD research. So there's a
yeah.
lot of different interesting, like, kind of players here. What's your take on the landscape in that
Well,
regard?
that's what's new over the last couple years has been the rise of for-profit companies focused on psychedelics.
Hmm.
So in the past, when I started MAPS in '86, there was no hope for investors. I mean, the research had been shut down. There was no psychedelic research taking place. The FDA um, didn't really start opening the door for years later. Um, and there were so many political obstacles, so many social, cultural fears and concerns, resistance people concerned about at the FDA at the regulatory level. So it's only been the last couple of years that because of the progress that MAPS has made and Hefter Research, other nonprofits, Beckley Foundation in England that have been sort of pioneering this move towards psychedelics, it's only because we made enough progress
Hmm.
that investors could start coming in and see that they could, possibly make money and that they wouldn't have to worry about all these political and cultural
Hmm.
issues. So the landscape has fundamentally changed in the last couple of years. And now there's 3 companies that are listed on the stock market that have a market cap of $1.5 billion. 3 pharmaceutical companies, for-profit psychedelic companies,
Oh, wow.
and they're only in phase 2. And we're in
Is that
phase 3.
Compass?
Yeah, Compass is worth 1.2 billion, something like
Hmm.
that. Field Trip, Mind Medicine. Field Trip is like 120 million or something. Mind Medicine last week was like 290 million market cap. These are companies that have done virtually nothing, tell a story. Now, Compass has done a lot. Compass has done a lot. They've raised over $200 million in the capital markets. But so that's part of but it's not coming from traditional pharma. That's the other thing. The for-profit work with psychedelics is coming from new companies that have just been set up to focus in this area. We don't see big pharma. Other than the one exception is Johnson and Johnson, which owns Janssen, which made ketamine, S-ketamine, into a medicine for depression. But that's again, S-ketamine as a pharmacological treatment without psychotherapy. To give you a sense of the other kind of landscape, for 30 years, we have been trying since 1990 to start research inside the Veterans Administration. And the presentation I just gave before this was to the Bronx VA. We have FDA, IRB approval. We've got a CRADA, which is a cooperative research and development agreement between the Bronx VA and MAPS. They're moving forward. Other VAs are very interested. And over the weekend, I got the news that there's a good chance that the Department of Defense is ready to fund up to a $500,000 to $1 million, a small MDMA proof of concept study inside a Department of Defense military active duty soldier context. So the culture is moving in this way. And then to speak about the elections that just happened, most of us know who won the presidential election. Some of us can't figure it out yet, but the clear winner is drug policy reform. So, the Oregon Psilocybin Initiative, which creates a mechanism on a state level for people to get access to psilocybin and licensed guides, not just for clinical conditions, but for personal growth. Psychedelics, plant psychedelics were decriminalized, made the lowest enforcement priority in Washington, D.C. Medical marijuana and marijuana legalization passed in every state that it was on the ballot. So there's a general cultural shift that's happening. The landscape is never been better for this kind of research. And I think what has blocked this research in the past has been this sort of prohibitionist mentality, this drug war mentality. But now we see that even President-elect Biden who did a lot to escalate the drug war, even particularly the RAVE Act, which was reducing America's vulnerability to ecstasy, which criminalized harm reduction. It was a terrible bill, and he did do stuff contributed to mass incarceration. President-elect Biden sees that as a mistake. So I think the overall landscape is very exciting, and one challenge for us, since we think that nonprofit development will maximize public benefit and be different than for-profit, there's a challenge for us because a lot of people are now saying, why should I give you money? Why don't I just invest money somewhere else?
Right.
I'm like, well, yeah, you can, and you maybe should invest money, but we should be, by virtue of the fact that we pioneered the field through the nonprofit, there's a lot of things that are non-monetizable that we want to do. In particular, these Israelis and Palestinians are using ayahuasca and MDMA together, and we're studying that for cultural reconciliation in this unit of mystical experience and working through their traumas. And so we do believe that we will tell a different story, and we will act in a different way, and we will maximize public benefit, not profit. And we think we can make a good enough case to donors that they will continue to donate to MAPS while they may also send money to for-profit companies where they can invest.
And I imagine, I mean, there's got to be, the government's got to trust someone to like train the therapist, even when these things are legalized, right?
Well, trust is again, I go back to Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. So the way they verify is they look at our outcomes. They've basically, the FDA has basically left it up to us to develop the therapy training program, and then they look for the effectiveness at the outcomes that we get from the studies.
Mm.
So the way that we think MDMA will be made into a medicine, this will be true for psilocybin as well, is there's called REMS, which is risk evaluation and mitigation strategies that the FDA can customize for each particular drug. For psilocybin, for MDMA, the drug is not the therapy. It's the therapy. It's the psychotherapy. The drug makes it more effective. So the sponsors of the research train the therapists, and the FDA will require in these REMS that the only people that can prescribe and treat patients are people that have been through the training program to learn the therapy. Then, of course, they can innovate if they want to, but they've got the basics. So that the FDA will be relying on us, requiring us to do the training of the therapists, and only people that we put on a list that have passed our training can be involved prescribing and treating patients. And I think the FDA doesn't regulate psychotherapy. They don't understand psychotherapy. We're having some problems with the FDA because they've indicated in our phase 3 studies and our phase 2 studies, we have a 2-person therapy team, the often male, female, but not always. The lead person is a licensed therapist. The second person is a student, even learning to get a license. For a while, the FDA was saying, we want the lead person now to become an MD or a Ph.D. So this is bureaucratic ass covering. They think it looks good, these more credentials, but it doesn't increase safety or efficacy. So we're arguing with the FDA about the training program and also about the credentials of the providers, but it's really up to us to provide data, and then FDA has to respond to the data. So there will be training programs that we're establishing. That's going to be the limiting factor to how much this can roll out, because it's going to require training, and we feel that a lot of the training is actually untraining. So you go to a lot of therapists, and most of the therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, prolonged exposure, they're scripted, there's lessons, there's a whole sort of cluster, you could say, what's the word I'm looking for is eluding me, but there's algorithms. There's a whole series of algorithms for, how you do therapy, but it's imposed on the person. Our therapeutic approach is kind of inner-directed therapy. You give somebody a psychedelic, whatever emerges in whatever order is what you deal with, and you support it, and you support the full expression of it. And so a lot of our training is to untrain people from being more interventionist and to become more supportive. But there will be training requirements, and we will be sort of negotiating with FDA the credentials.
Well, that's fascinating, and I know everyone's everyone's excited about the direction this is headed in, and also, really like the kind of more cautious approach than kind of the hippie movement and everything that went wrong there. It seems like a lot of the things that could derail this are being carefully
Well,
um,
I
kept in
hear
check.
you, but I wanted to say that being an old hippie myself,
Yeah.
um, that the times were different, so that
Mm.
we're we've learned a lot. I think one of the big mistakes that the hippies made was counterculture. The whole idea that psychedelics are counterculture. When you set yourself up as counterculture, you're going to be squashed
Right.
often. So we are mainstreaming. So we're talking about that. I think there was an over reliance in the 60s on the hope for a one dose miracle cure.
Mm.
Take psychedelics, you have this experience, you're enlightened, you know more than everybody else, and now you're a prophet. So I think that we've gone away from the one dose miracle cure. Um, but I think that our approach, while we're more cautious, I think people are more desperate. The problems are greater. The problems of suicide have grown. The problems of depression have grown, despite the vast increase in the number of people that are medicated for depression or medicated to avoid suicide. So that we are careful, we are step by step, we are incremental, um, but the need is greater. The culture has grown, and so I do think that we've got. I wouldn't only attribute it to hippies being irresponsible, and now we're
Mm.
more
Yeah.
wiser.
Yeah. Well, listen, speaking of your own experience, a couple of rapid fire questions for you here. So, what is your personal favorite psychedelic?
Well, I don't. It's hard for me to answer that because it's different psychedelics for different purposes.
Mm.
Um, but I would say that if I was a sailor on a ship that was shipwrecked and I survived, and I was the only one on a deserted island, and I could only have one drug, it would be LSD.
Mm.
Much as I love MDMA, the thing about MDMA is that you can steer it a little bit,
Mm.
which is good in therapy. But with LSD, you have a hard time negotiating as your unconscious material comes to the surface. You can negotiate with MDMA. With LSD, you kind of really have to let it happen. So that if I had just one drug, it would be LSD because it would maybe bring me to places that I wasn't quite ready to go to. And
Okay.
with MDMA, it can bring you where you aren't quite ready to go to, but it's a more in a gentle way.
Mm. Gotcha. Okay. If you could have dinner or say smoke a joint with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Hmm. I could smoke a joint with anybody in the world. Well, um, I guess I would say living or dead. How are you?
I'm going to say any time period.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in smoking a joint with Carl Jung. And
Mm.
from my understanding, he never did psychedelics, but he knew all about them. And so I'd be curious. He felt that, I mean, he was in such touch with his own unconscious. But it would be Carl Jung, I think.
What's something that most people don't know about you?
Hmm. Um, I would okay that most people don't know about me that my long-term goal is to have a psychedelic clinic on the beach in Sarasota, Florida, where I could work with college students who are looking for purpose and meaning in life, the same way that my guidance counselor helped me so much.
Mm.
That would be my after we've made psychedelics into medicines, I'd like to have a little tiny psychedelic clinic on the beach and work with young people and old people too. But
That's a
that,
beautiful vision. Um, all right, last question. You have a 15-second commercial that goes out to the world. What would you say?
um, um, that the that we have more in common than separate us, but that the understanding of our commonality will not be homogenizing us, but will help us appreciate differences. That paradoxically, we see how we're all connected and the same, and we can all be more uniquely our individual selves.
Mm, right on. Awesome. Well, listen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And yeah, it's been really fun speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And if people want to go to the maps.org website, there's all sorts of information there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I normally end with a kind of plug
Oh,
zone.
okay.
Is there,
Okay.
yeah, so maps.com or maps.org rather.
.org, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so
Awesome. Yeah.
much. I
Yeah.
really
Thank
enjoyed it.
you so much. Um, I'll let you get to your next thing, but just really good to meet you. And I really appreciate your time and respect all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just say that we're doing all the scientific work, but what's so crucial is public education. And so
Mm.
that's why I said yes, and that's why I think what you're doing too is so important to prepare for all the people for the changes ahead. And if we can just get honest education out to people, I think the culture really will be ready.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, thanks so much and have a good rest of your week.